So another lesson I like to share with people. My coach is a fourth generation submarine captain. It's a captain or commander. Anyway, his father was a captain of a submarine. His father was a captain of a submarine, and his father was so fourth generation. So reasonably smart individual, as you could imagine. I don't think they give nuclear submarines to pretty substandard leaders. Anyway, one day we were talking about a problem or a challenge that I had with one of my clients, and we were kind of discussing it. And he said, "Let me tell you a story." And all of his stories were obviously all very, very nautical but nice. They were all to do with the sea and and mainly submarines. But anyway, I hope he sees that as a compliment if he's watching this. Best coach. So he was probably about maybe the fourth coach I ever had, but certainly one of the best. Anyway, so he told me this story about how he had been uh, on patrol, I guess, for about 4 months, and they'd been submerged for about three, which is a long time. But these nuclear submarines can stay submerged for a month after they produce everything they need, oxygen and food and all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes when they're tracking red subs across the globe, they have to do so incredibly stealthily, and they can't even get messages back to base, the Admiralty, or wherever. Forgive me if you're a nuclear submarine commander, because all of my language will be wrong, because, that's not my language. But anyway, here's what happened. They had been under the Arctic Circle for a couple of months, tracking red subs across the globe without being detected. Their job was to track without being detected. And on one particular evening or night, my coach was asleep in his quarters. It was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and on the other end of the boat, and they do call submarines boats for some reason, unfortunately, a young technician, a young seaman, who I think was about 18 or 19 years old. He was an electrician. He was a welder. He was welding some pieces of metal together, and nuclear submarines, although I've never been in one, although he has taken me around a submarine, which was, and explained everything to me, it was phenomenal. But it wasn't a nuclear submarine. Um, you can imagine that submarines are full of very hard edges and very unforgiving environment, and pipes under immense pressure and temperature. A dangerous place. Anyway, this particular poor chap was doing some welding at 3 or 4 in the morning. Something happened. There was a terrible accident, and he died. He unfortunately died. And of course, my coach, the captain, found out about it almost instantly, and was obviously alerted so that he could be made aware that one of the seamen under his command had died. And then he asked me this question. He said, whose fault was it that that young chap died, had killed himself? Well, a terrible accident at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And just as I was about to answer, he said, let me give you some options. So as you're listening to this, maybe you're thinking about, okay, well, whose fault was that? Was it the individual's fault, perhaps? Was it the person that trained that person, perhaps, and maybe signed him off to do that kind of work at that time in the morning unsupervised, and maybe he wasn't quite ready for it? Was it who was on watch that night, right, at 4 o'clock, 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning? Was it his boss, right, the person that he reported to? Was it the person who asked him to do that task unsupervised at 3 or 4? You get the idea, right? Was it the captain's fault, right? So anyway, I thought about it for a moment. I said, well, it was probably the person that asked him to do it at that time in the morning, and maybe didn't pay attention and didn't look after him, or didn't make sure that he was careful about what he was doing and walk him through the procedure and all of that kind of stuff. And my coach said, no, it was my fault. I said, but it can't have been your fault. You were asleep. You were on the other end of the boat. You were asleep. It was like 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning. How could it possibly have been your fault? And he said, well, it was my submarine. When I take responsibility for that submarine, I take responsibility for everything that happens, the good and the bad, on that submarine. This was entirely my responsibility. And I guess he was right. Okay, so what's the lesson there? Well, the lesson there is one of the things that we, in our very early coaching sessions with our leaders, talk about is we ask them to write this down. It's my submarine, right? One of our leadership golden rules is it's always my fault. And so when we're coaching people and they bemoan to us the fact that the people that work for them have done something slightly bizarre or unusual, of course nobody's died, but they'll say, well, why did that guy do that? And I'm so grumpy with that guy, and why don't they understand this, and why don't they understand that? I always go, okay, so time out. Who runs the submarine? Who's the captain of the submarine? Whose submarine is it? They go, yeah, it's my submarine. It's always my fault. So I think another important lesson is, people say, there's a great quote, I think it's by Tim Belichick or somebody like that, it's amazing what can be done if you don't care who gets the credit. It may have been Ronald Reagan, I'm not entirely sure, but I know my coach says, as a leader, it's always your fault because it's your submarine. So remember that too. I think that if you're not happy with the way the submarine's being run, do something about it because it's your submarine and you're the captain.